What's up guys, welcome to Daily Dose of Reddit. I'm your host, Zach, and today's subreddit is r/MaliciousCompliance. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that bell to never miss an episode. Alright guys, this story was called Never Leave a Spill? You got it! Quite some time ago, I used to work at Walmart, and honestly, it was by far the worst job I've ever had. I could go on for hours about all the horror stories I have from that place. One story in particular I feel is a good fit here. You see, the store I worked in had a rule that if you see a spill, you are to guard the area to keep customers from slipping and falling. You were not to leave the spill for any reason while you flagged down another employee so that they could fetch cleaning supplies. Only managers and cleaning crew had radios. I understand the logic here, as a lawsuit would certainly cost much more than an hourly employee's time standing next to a spill until it was cleaned up. However, there are a few issues with this in practice. I worked the evening shift in the meat department, and most days I was the only person in my department. I was situated between frozen foods and produce, which more often than not only had one-person shifts as well, but they also closed much earlier than my department. This meant that I was the only person in my corner of the store for about half of my shift. If I came across a spill, there was no telling how long I would have to wait around for another employee to come by, because there was literally no one else working in or around my area. Also, being in the meat department, we had multiple cleaning stations all around. One was always a few steps away. One day, while working alone, I noticed a small spill, so I stood next to it, per procedure, for about 10 minutes. And this time, nobody, customer nor coworker, had even entered my view. I couldn't help but think how dumb this was, as I could see a cleaning station just on the other side of a bunker. I decided to throw in the flag and just go get the cleaning supplies and take care of it myself. Because even if a customer did come around, I could still see the spill and easily call out to them to watch their step. Unsurprisingly, I was able to make the round trip without any incidents. As I was cleaning it, a manager came walking up and took notice of it.
"What happened here?"
"Just a spill. I've got it all sorted."
"Did you just happen to have cleaning supplies on you?"
No, but they were just right there. I was able to fetch them without losing sight of the spill."
"That's not how we do things. Someone could have gotten hurt."
"No, as I could have called out to anyone that came near it. I was never more than a few steps away."
"Doesn't matter. You should have stood next to the spill and waited for someone else to come by."
This went on for a few minutes, but the manager was not budging, so I conceded. That was not good enough for him, as he then proceeded to write me up for negligence and unsafe work practices. I was livid, but I was a college student and needed the job, so I just kept quiet and returned to my shift. A week or two later, as I was once again the only person in my corner of the store, I happened upon another spill. This time, I shrugged and decided to guard it as if my job depended on it. I checked my watch and noticed that I had about 3 hours left on my shift, and had a small laugh at the thought I might be standing at that spot guarding a puddle instead of closing my department. 10 minutes passed, 30 minutes passed, 1 hour passed. Around this time, I was bored out of my mind. But then I heard a call over the intercom system that made it so much more worth it. "We need an associate from the meat department to the back for a truck." This was followed by a few other calls for other departments for their trucks arriving as well. I started laughing out loud at this because I knew that this meant that the very few people that were likely to come by my department were now at the loading dock unloading trucks while I stood guard over my puddle. A few minutes passed before I heard the second call. "We need an associate from the meat department to the back for the truck." I just stood there counting the lights on the ceiling. 1 hour left on my shift, and there still had not been a single fellow employee walk by. I assumed everyone was starting to finish up their own trucks by this point and would likely soon have to start unloading my truck as well. I was watching the minutes go by in anticipation, trying to decide if someone would come find me before my shift ended or not. I got my answer 15 minutes before the end of my shift, as the very same manager from before came storming through the meat department, furious. We made eye contact, and he stormed over to me and started yelling about how they had been calling for me to unload the truck and how they are now behind schedule and so on. Once he took a breath long enough for me to speak, I asked simply, "Can you go to a spill station and grab something to clean this up? I've been here for a while now." He glanced down at the puddle next to me, and I thought he was going to explode.
You mean to tell me that you didn't unload the truck because you were watching a spill?
Yes.
Why didn't you just clean it up?
But leaving the spill would be unsafe for any customers. Besides, you wrote me up for doing that very thing recently, right? The manager tosses his hands up in defeat and walks the 15 steps away to the nearest spill station and returned with the supplies that he promptly gave to me to clean the spill myself.
Once you're done, go back to the loading dock and start on your truck.
Sorry, I have only about 10 minutes left on my shift, and as I've been standing here guarding the spill, I never got my second break. So, I'm going to the break room for a bit before clocking out. Oh, and you'll need to find someone to close down my department as well. At this, the manager just stomped off in a rage. I cleaned up the spill, played on my phone in the break room for a bit, and clocked out with a smile on my face. I know that the manager just made someone else do all the work and wasn't personally affected by this, but knowing that I could be a thorn in his side was enough for me. Yes, this is the malicious compliance that I have been waiting for. It's not like some huge freaking nuclear meltdown, but it's just inconvenient enough for whoever's being annoying. Alright, this story was called Refuse to Give Me My Money, I Refuse to Let You Make Any. I owned a sign company. I received a phone call from someone at a local mall. He was opening a restaurant in the food court. The catch was that he wanted to be open in 2 weeks for Black Friday, the busiest shopping day of the year. I met with him and mall management at the same time so that we could discuss ideas and get approval at the same time to speed up production. We got everything okayed, including his overhead backlit menu sign, smaller signs on both walls, and signs for both registers. All in all, it was going to be a pretty large order. I typically get a 50% deposit, but the customer said something about international money transfers, and the mall management jumped right in to explain that payments were taking a couple of weeks to process, but everything they'd charged him had been paid. Because I had been doing a lot of work in the mall and I was trying to help them get this guy open, I agreed to do it without the deposit. I did the layouts, he approved them. I showed him samples, he approved them. I got everything finished and installed the Tuesday before he needed them. That's when things went downhill fast. He immediately started complaining that the material was wrong and it wasn't what he wanted, even though he'd seen samples. Then he complained that the graphics were wrong, even though he'd approved them. He complained that the prices were wrong, even though they all matched the menu he provided. Wednesday afternoon, I called him again and his wife answered. She cheerfully told me that I could take down my darn signs. They weren't paying for them, and that they had ordered signs cheaper from someone else, but they couldn't get them ready in time, so as soon as the other signs were ready, mine were going in the trash. So realizing that I'd screwed myself by doing the job without a deposit, I hung everything on her little side comment that I could take down my darn signs. Thursday, I had a delightful Thanksgiving lunch with my family. We watched football, we laughed, we enjoyed the day. I took my wife and kids home, loaded up a ladder, and joyfully went to the mall. I'd done enough after-hours work at the mall that I knew there would be a door open somewhere and people in the large stores getting ready for Black Friday crowds. I went in, tossed my ladder over the restaurant counter, and started taking down the signs. A couple of merchants in the mall asked me if the place was already closing. I told them the story, and the next thing I know, they are helping me take down the signs. In 30 minutes, the place went from looking like a fully opened, ready-to-rock restaurant to looking closed. I went home and slept like a baby. When I turned on my phone at 7:30 on Black Friday, I had already had 15 missed calls from the restaurant owner, his wife, and the mall management. I called the mall management and they weren't happy. I told them the whole story and they still weren't happy with me, but they understood. I waited 15 minutes before the restaurant owner called screaming on the phone demanding that I return with the signs. I politely told him that I needed the full amount, plus the cost of reinstallation, plus an extra $50 for working on an off day. He screamed at me, I hung up. He called back once more and demanded that I bring them back and he would pay me the next week. I said no, I needed cash. He screamed at me again, I hung up. I avoided the mall because screw Black Friday, but from what I hear, it was comical. His entire backlit sign was nothing but lit up bulbs. He'd handwritten a menu on an old box and taped it to the front of the counter. Every restaurant in the food court was slammed all day and nobody would even take his free samples. He closed mid-afternoon after realizing nobody was going to buy. He went through the entire shopping weekend with no signs and no business. The best part was that 2 weeks later, when his new signs from India finally arrived, they were the wrong size. Screw you, Mr. Restaurant Owner, for ordering signs from me that you knew you weren't going to pay for because you'd already ordered them from someone else. Yes, this is a beautiful example of what happens when you combine revenge with malicious compliance. You get pissed off restaurant owners that cheated you. Good job to the Redditor. This story was called Play Illegal Games, Win Legal Prizes. I worked for a large drug chain as the frontline manager. For this chain, the pharmacist is the owner of the shop. They run it, but the company still owns the whole thing. I guess it's like they're a corporate franchisee. Anyways, this shop had a history of not being able to keep a manager in the role I just took on for very long. The training was practically non-existent and nothing was documented. On with the show. One day, within my first 3 months, I'm sick as a dog and can barely get out of bed. As it's a health and wellness business, and as I couldn't work even if I wanted to, I called in to the back of the house manager. This manager acts as the assistant manager to the owner as they were real-life friends. I said I was sick and I couldn't be into work. I was asked who would cover for me, as I had to open the shop every day, and I said I didn't know. I was told that as a manager, I was responsible for this and needed to find someone. Fair enough. Even though nobody told me about this, I pulled out my staff listing and found someone to cover my shift who had keys and could open the store. Keep in mind that most of my staff were part-time or students at the time, and I only had one full-time employee that worked Monday through Friday. When I got into work the next day, the assistant manager told me I couldn't call in sick and that the next time I called in sick, I shouldn't bother coming back. I was shocked, as this is very unprofessional, and I didn't expect it coming from the second in command at the store. My one full-time employee starts telling me that I'm the best manager they've had for the last 2 years, and during that time, they went through 6 managers before me. I'm told that I've done more in my time there than all the previous managers did in total. Things like having the staff cash out on company time, or not making people stay to find errors or recount on their own time. Basically, not breaking labor laws. Ha 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 ha. So, the owner calls me into their office and tells me that due to my sick day, I won't be paid for it as I'm still on probation, and that the accountant who does payroll will be instructed as such. This was unexpected as I'm a salaried employee, and probation or not, I know this isn't right. But I agree and get on with my day. Being that there were lots of part-time/students that worked there, we had an actual punch clock to clock in and clock out for all employees, including me. Being a salaried manager, whenever one of my staff couldn't work and if I couldn't find a replacement, I end up covering the shift myself. I looked at it like an opportunity to get to know my evening staff better as I usually never saw them. On the paycheck that my sick day happened, I also needed to cover a few extra shifts for employees, as everyone seems to get sick at about the same time, and as the manager, I'm the one who totals up the time cards prior to giving them over to the accountant. These time cards can't be faked as they are physically punched and encoded with dates and times from the machine. Here's the r/malicious compliance part. I handed my team's time cards with mine on top to the accountant, who looks at me and reminds me about the instructions she's gotten from the owner. She didn't like it, but had her orders. I tell her that I understand and here's my time card. She looks at it, raises her eyebrows at me, and before she can ask a question, I remind her that I am not a salaried employee as I'm still on probation, and that normal pay rules should apply, even though this is illegal. She looks at me, smiles, and confirms that was what she was told by the owner. It turns out that deducting the sick day I missed, but adding the 3 extra shifts I had to work that period to cover for other staff not showing up, I ended up working 96 hours that payday. So, because I wasn't salaried, the accountant paid me time and a half for the extra 16 hours I worked. Also, here's some pro-revenge for you. Because I knew that these things weren't really legal, I decided I was done with this company and this boss. I emailed my friend who helped me get the job the story I just told. He just so happened to be the head of their corporate security, and I gave him permission to send it to whoever he thinks would need to see it. Later that week, I got a call from another employer asking if I could start immediately. I said yes, of course, and went back into work. This call happened just after I had gotten home from work. Yes, before cell phones were a thing. I walked into work, went into the back office to collect my personal effects, and came back out. My shift supervisor was perplexed as I had just left for the night. I shook his hand and told him that it was nice working with him. He was shocked and asked, "You're firing me?" I actually LOL'd at that and told him, "No, I'm quitting. You get to keep working here." I went to hand my keys and resignation to the night pharmacist and told them to pass it on to the owner. My letter consisted of, "I quit. Signed, me." I went back a few weeks later to get some stuff. I still shop there as it's close to my home, and the one full-time employee says, "Hi," with a big smile and tells me the following in hushed tones.
A few days after you left, some big suits from head office came in. We had a meeting with the owner and left. When the owner left after that day, they haven't seen the owner since. Seems the suits came and took the store away from them based on the owner's inability to keep your old position filled.
Employee didn't know about the email I sent to the head of security, but when I mentioned it, the employee lit up like a light bulb and said, "So that's why." The icing on the cake for me was that the owner knew about this connection I had with the head of security as they were listed as the reference, and the owner contacted them directly about the referral. Doing illegal stuff to someone with a direct line to the head of security is probably not a good idea. Alright guys, this story was great and all, but I really wanted to know just how screwed over the owner was. That would make it a truly satisfying malicious compliance / pro revenge hybrid. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that bell to never miss an episode.